What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of the Overview. I'm ChanManV, and we're back from break. It was like a 6-week, 7-week long break that we had with the Overwatch beta break. But as you can see, we've got some changes to the show. We've got 2 new co-hosts, Fishstix and Shayed will be joining me every week now. You guys are awesome, and I could try to do justice introducing you guys, but I figured it'd be best if I have you guys just kind of tell everybody who you are, why you love Overwatch, all that good stuff. So, Fishstix, why don't you start off?
Sure. I've been a FPS fan for basically my entire life, playing games from Tribes to Quake to Enemy Territory to Brink to Dirty Bomb. So I've played around basically anything that's arena-based with projectiles that don't shoot automatically or instantaneously. If it takes a while for a rocket to get from point A to point B, I probably played that game. So I've been sort of in the genre for my entire life. So when I saw this game, it really attracted me instantaneously because it does appeal to FPS gamers like me. It's very unique and awesome in that way. So as soon as I saw this game and I saw it was supported by Blizzard, I knew that it was going to be something that I jumped onto right away. So absolutely so stoked to be playing. We're actually a little bit late right now. It's kind of fitting. We're a little bit late because I stayed up way too late playing Overwatch last night and barely got up in time for this. So apologies for that, guys. But thanks for sitting tight and checking out the podcast.
It's all good, man. Yeah, definitely a pleasure to have you. We had Fishstix on as the first guest, if you guys didn't check out the pilot episode, and it was amazing. You guys have to check that out if you get a chance, or whenever you guys get a chance. Shayed, you want to introduce yourself?
Shayed. Basically, Overwatch is my first FPS, so lots to learn, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Before Overwatch, I was basically just a MOBA fangirl. I played a lot of League and Heroes of the Storm, but yeah, I'm really excited about Overwatch and everything that's going to happen now that the break is done and we get to play more, and hopefully no more breaks after that.
yeah, absolutely. Also, for people that don't know Shade, she does a lot of work with some teams, particularly one team, which I think we'll probably get to at some point, and then some other sponsors like AlphaTraff and good stuff like that. But I know most of you guys in the chat are here for our guest. We have obviously somebody who's been a big part of the Overwatch community since the release of the beta. And if you guys haven't been following it, he's the #1 streamer. He's like one of our best players we have in the Overwatch community too. It's none other than Seagull. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, really excited to have you. I know we talked a while back, right, about having you come on, and we never got a chance to figure out a good time. So what better time than to have you come back and talk about all these changes that we've seen in the game. So excited to get your insight on it, man.
Oh, yeah, this last patch so far has been incredible. Everything,
yeah,
tournament, see some Torbjorns, Bastions, see everything, man. It's just like a kid in a candy store right now. I'm freaking out.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, today, guys, topic-wise, we're going to talk about the changes. I mean, spend a good amount of time on the show talking about the changes. Touch a little bit on some of the events that have been happening. It's only been like 6 days, and it's already been, I don't know, 3 events now. At Fishstix, I think you even hosted one of them. So we'll touch a little bit on that. Yep. And then Q&A at the end. Take a few of your questions. You can post those in the Reddit thread that we have, which I will let me just post really quickly in the chat, or you can tweet it to the Overview GG, and we'll take those questions at the end. Okay, changes. All right, let's start off by there's a lot of changes. So I figured we would try to tackle the changes to the heroes and the balance changes to start off with. So Seagull, why don't we start with the ultimate change, like just the changes that they've made to it. And those of you not familiar with it, ultimates don't get charged up by taking damage now, and as well as there's a slow regen to the ultimate charge for all heroes. What do you think of that, Seagull?
I think one of my main concerns with the last beta phase was that, in tournaments so far, that it was really, really tough for casters to keep track of everything. It was really hard for players to keep track of everything with regards to ultimates because everything was just so fast happening all the time from a caster's perspective, but also from a player perspective. It encouraged, I guess I should say the mechanic they removed, right, to change about ultimates. Mm-hmm. So ultimates before, they used to charge by taking damage and dealing damage, and now they removed it by saying okay, now it's only going to charge by dealing damage and not by taking damage at all. And so in tournaments before, we were running these weird situations where, tanks would intentionally go suicide onto the enemy team because by dying, they build a huge ton of ultimates and stuff like that. And so by removing that change, it's, slows down the progression of ultimate charging significantly so far. And I think that is probably the best thing they could have done so far for the tournaments, because it makes it a lot easier for it to cast, and it's easier all around for players as well.
Mm-hmm. Fishstix, thoughts?
It was one of the main points of feedback that the competitive scene had in the last phase of the beta, was just ultimates charge too quickly. There's way too many ultimates, and specifically, it seems counterintuitive that you kind of get rewarded for getting hit. So I love these changes, and it's pretty great to see this right away, because this was absolutely number one thing that people were talking about in the higher echelons of competitive play. So not a huge surprise to see it, but also really happy to see that Blizzard is directly addressing some of the issues that we had in more ways than one. Not only did they decrease the frequency of ultimates, they nixed the aspect of the gameplay where you kind of were rewarded for taking damage. So I'm all for it, man. I love it.
Yeah. Shayed, thoughts?
I think it's definitely a lot better now. It kind of like helps the pace of the game a little bit. Obviously, I play a lot of Mercy. And one of the things I noticed is with the 25% reduction on her ultimate charge, I actually feel like I get ultimate faster now, although it's not as effective. It seems like, it's a lot faster, especially like healing tanks. It's really nice.
Yeah. The Mercy Mercy definitely, I feel like, is the only character I've seen that's had an increase in the frequency of it. But yeah, seeing so many ultimates before, just people just chaining them over and over again was impressive to watch for a while, but it was getting a little crazy after just seeing some of the competitive events and how that was working out. So really, really love the changes. Let's talk about, I guess, let's go to some of the characters, or try to highlight at least the big changes to some of the heroes. We'll start off with Bastion. I think Bastion's been a huge topic for a lot of folks, and you can kind of see the change. I kind of have it up on the overlay here, but Shayed, we'll start off with you in this one, since you were last on the last one. What do you think about the changes? No shield now. A lot of changes to just the armor to Bastion, and even just some of the just the switching, just the what do they call it whenever he goes from Sentry to Recon? Just that aspect of it. Yeah,
I think in some ways he's a little bit weaker, but also at the same time he's like super strong too. So like taking away the shield kind of, it takes away the ability for like me to go and be like, oh, I'm going to hide behind my Bastion shield and like not take any damage while I heal him. So that's probably a good thing that they took that away. But at the same time, like the amount of armor and health that he has now, especially like being able to switch back and forth between turret form and not turret and getting your health and armor back like pretty much instantly, is really, really strong.
Yeah. Seagull?
I like the Bastion changes a lot so far in terms of, I would say probably the competitive metagame, because, Bastion wasn't really used prior to this patch. But I am a little bit worried because I still feel that I remember, Jeff Kaplan released that balance vlog, I guess you could sort of talk about it as, right? And he says one of the main reasons why they wanted to change Bastion and Torbjorn was because they felt they were too strong at lower levels of play, but not strong enough at higher levels of play. So how does this change really affect lower levels of play? I mean, at higher levels, yeah, sure. Now he's, incredibly viable. He's we saw, latest tournament we had Bastion used, we had Torbjorn used, but how does that impact the lower level players? I don't think that really improved it for them. In fact, it probably just made it worse.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I got to agree. These characters are both still pub smashing monsters in a lot of cases. Definitely, obviously, Bastion and Torbjorn way more viable in competitive play. The lack of mobility, though, it still allows for good teamwork. Is going to take out a good, even a Bastion that's behind a shield. There's still ways to get back there. So, yeah.
I mean, now that he can swivel 360 too, I think that's even harder, especially in lower ranks, to deal with. You can't just heck even just get a Winston just to jump behind a Bastion and just kill him. That's like impossible to do now. So
Well, it kind of negated they have a Bastion that we can't kill. Let's send a Tracer at him. Like
yeah,
that doesn't really exist
that's
anymore.
right. So yeah, to your point, Seagull, I think it's actually potentially worse for the casuals, which should be a huge concern still for them, given that the highest level of play is only a very small percentage of the user base. Okay, why don't we talk about Torbjorn now, since that just the theme of turrets. Might as well talk about the other big change, which was Torbjorn. Fishstix, what do you think about the changes?
I'm not a Torb player myself. I do love the fact that he's more viable. Just as forget the turret, his gun is way better. He has the secondary fire and the primary fire now, so he's just a much more flexible character in general. And I think that's probably one of the best things about it. His ult, it actually allows him to deal a decent amount of damage and contribute to team fights. Of course, his turret is good as well, but I think I'll let Seagull talk a little bit more about that. I think he has more experience than I do.
Yeah, Brandon, what do you think? Or Seagull?
I think right now, I like the way they tweaked Torbjorn in that they made him, I think, more mobile in a lot of ways. They made it before it was pretty hard to be a Torbjorn player because it would take you, you drop your turret, then it's like, all right, let me go kill however many people it takes in order to get a level 2, and then repeat that for level 3, or you get the idea. And so I think probably my favorite part about that change is actually in just the more general concept of removing scrap from upgrading the turret. And I think I like that change because currently, for I would say normal games, like non-competitive games, there was always the issue where Torbjorn would have to decide, do I want to upgrade my turret, which personally benefits me in terms of my stats, my scoreboards, stuff like that, or do I want to drop armor and give my support like Mercy or Zenyatta armor? And they don't have to make that choice anymore. So I think that's kind of nice in some ways. Like, I think that sort of design is sort of reflected in heroes like Zarya as well, where, they have a personal shield and they have a shield for other people. And I think that's a pretty good change by Blizzard standards. And I kind of like that a lot.
Shayed, what do you think? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, as for the actual balance changes of the hero, the general, I like the fact that he's more mobile, I guess what I'm trying to say, because before, I think the main concern people had with this turret was, relied a lot on team protecting it. And, I can see how he's improved a lot in pub play where, maybe you don't have a Reinhardt protecting your turret all the time. Maybe you don't have a Winston dropping a shield on it at all times too. So now, because you're not as committed to one individual turret, you can rebuild it in more places. It's probably better.
Yeah, we saw it in yesterday's event. We saw some Torbjorn, definitely Torbjorn and Bastion, like you were saying. So it's definitely cool to start seeing it in the highest level of play. Long-term wise, do you see Torbjorn being played in the current meta after it's being developed a little bit more?
Yeah, I definitely think he'll be around for a little while. I'm not sure. It's always hard to predict long-term meta like that to some extent, right? Because you can't really just say whether something is useful. And even just looking at Bastion, like the interaction between Bastion and Tracer that Shayed was talking about earlier, it's kind of hard to say just things like that because, what if Tracer players get really good at blinking behind them and hitting the core, when the core of the Bastion is the new mechanic where you hit him in the back on the little blue thing that's coming out of his back and he takes triple damage instead of double. There's lots of small mechanics like that are hard to talk about until players get better and learn around them more and just play around it more.
Yeah.
Even still, his ability to swivel on a Tracer with the 150 HP is a little rough.
Yeah, you can't solo flank Bastion. You just can't. It needs to be a team thing, which is kind of cool. It's like kind of cool. And I will say, actually, on a personal level, I watched the tournaments over the weekend, and probably the coolest play I saw all weekend long was Melty on Hanamura. With this really set play where they drop the Winston shield, set up Bastion on the top right of the objective on attack, and then they drop the Lucio bead, and it was just a really cool play. So I actually enjoyed seeing Bastion in the meta. And Torbjorn came into play as well over the weekend. I guess we can talk about those tournaments a little later, though.
Yeah, absolutely. As for the other character changes, any of the ones that you'd like to highlight, Shayed? Anyone that stands out to you?
My poor Mercy ult.
The
Cry.
distance, right? The actual the distance been reduced from 40 meters to 15 meters, right?
Yeah, it was down to 15. It's more than half, which is like a lot more than I expected. Um, I would like it if they added maybe 5 or 10 yards to it,
Mhm.
but I don't know if that's going to happen. You basically have to like stand on some top of someone's body in order to res them right now.
Yeah.
So it's a little unfortunate, but it's definitely still possible to get off like 4 3-man reses. It's just a little bit more about positioning now as opposed to like, oh, my team's dead. I'm going to stand, 40 yards back and just res everybody.
Yeah. I kind of wish there was some kind of visual indicator, like as the perimeter of it. Sometimes, I mean, I know you've played so much, so you just kind of like know. But I know whenever I'm playing Mercy, I kind of, it's like I'm just like tapping it until like I get close enough sometimes. But it just be kind of cool if there was something like that. What do you think, Fishstix, about the range decrease?
Uh, Again, this was also one of the most talked about things in the competitive scene. Is just Mercy's ult was too influential in the
Yeah.
previous phase of the beta.
Mhm.
So again, Blizzard has directly addressed this. Have they nerfed too hard? I'm not a Mercy player as well. It still seems to me like we do see Mercy revives coming into play in both the competitive scene and in public games. But yeah, I mean, was nerfing it by more than half maybe a little bit too much? Perhaps so. That's actually a trend with a bunch of other characters too. You saw stuff like Diva's Guardian Shield or whatever it's called was about halfway nerfed. You also saw Reinhardt's ult about halfway nerfed, and all of these things still seem somewhat useful to me. But it's gonna be like a balance thing over the next 6 months, 8 months, year, 2 years, 3 years. I think
Yeah.
Blizzard's gonna keep patching this game continuously and finding the right balance for all of these abilities. They did cleave off a whole lot with the Mercy ult, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of that come back.
Well, and her ability to pocket someone didn't change. Her damage boost is still just as good as it was before the patch, and her heal is also still just as strong. So that's still kind of the key Mercy thing, I guess.
Still a huge necessity. Mercy is to a lot of comps. Seagull, any other characters you'd like to highlight, or at least some of the changes they're having?
I
a
think
huge impact?
probably there's actually two of them. They're both kind of interesting to me. The first one would be the Bastion change to his normal, what they call the recon configuration. So if he's not in full turret mode, basically.
Yeah.
That, as well as Soldier 76, received
Okay.
massive buffs, where basically before it was, you would sit there and you just sort of spam your rifle and you would hope that it would hit them, but you couldn't really make sure because the accuracy had like a huge portion of inaccuracy. And now what they did was in the latest patch with 76 and Bastion was they improved the spread on those weapons and reduced the damage. Well, on 76's case, they reduced damage anyway. And so at longer ranges, and that actually made it so that was one of my main issues with 76 was that, if you sit there and you just hold down the button and you look at, I don't know, some guy's head across, mid-range, it's pretty RNG, just whether or not you hit the head or not, because unless you're doing 4-shot bursts pre-patch. And so what they did now is they said, all right, let's reduce the range, increase the accuracy. So that way it's practically like a laser beam at mid-range. And therefore, I think that allows, a lot better, I don't know how to say it, like basically if you have great aim as 76 now, you're way more effective because you can land a higher percentage of headshots with the new accuracy.
Yeah, 76 is kind of like the Pharah murderer right now at mid-range. I definitely like these updates to 76, though. It definitely gives more ability to guys that come from these hit scan games. If you come from enemy territory and stuff like that. I've seen Call of Duty players, enemy territory players, they tend towards Soldier 76 for pretty obvious reasons, and it sort of fits their playstyle a little bit better now.
Yeah, Shayed, what do you think of the change? I feel like I've been seeing more Soldier 76 too since the beta, so I think that's in line with what everybody's been saying here.
Yeah, I think we definitely have been seeing a lot more of Soldier since the beta came back online, and I always thought that he was really strong, but it was more because I thought like his ability to self-heal through like a 1v1 situation was just like insane. And it feels even more so now. And I really like playing with soldiers on my team, mostly because they're really fun to pocket, and that's basically all that I do. So the like damage boosted soldier is insane.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we move on to the new game mode? So they added 2 new maps and a new game mode, which was really really cool. It's King of the Hill for those of you that aren't familiar with it. What do you guys think of both, just the new maps as well as the new game mode? Start with the new maps and then we'll just dig into the game modes. Fishstix, what do you think of the new maps?
Visually, I think they're amazing. Some of the best maps I've seen in any FPS game, especially Nepal. It's got to be the prettiest multiplayer map I've seen, outside of like Battlefield and stuff like that. It's just gorgeous. I really like the design too. I'll be honest. When I first heard about Control Point being the new game type, I was somewhat disappointed simply because it's still the same core concept: stand on a point, capture it. The big obvious distinction here is that both teams are in effect attacking instead of one team attacking and one team defending. I really like it though. I've had a ton of fun playing it so far in pubs and some organized games here and there. It is a lot tighter corridors and like the point itself is much smaller than and more enclosed typically than you're used to seeing on other maps. So it kind of does have this more hectic, frenetic pace than the payload maps and the capture point maps. And that can be really exciting as like in public games, especially. It definitely more commonly has close games, I'd say. I can't tell you how many 99% comebacks I've seen, which is actually crazy. I just love the way that they laid out the game mechanics. All that said, I do know the competitive scene has some issues with it. You do see Lucio just is so good. Winston is so Reaper.
Yep.
Like some of the characters just seem a little bit too good in the game mode, but overall, I really love playing it. I think it has a good future, even if Reaper is super strong. It's just a different meta than Payload, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think you just named the comp that's been discovered recently, or at least Shade, you
Just
and
like
Brandon
all
named it.
Reapers, all Winstons, all Lucios
Right.
forever.
I think it
Nothing
started
else
off more
matters.
soldiers. It's like when I first started playing, I saw a lot of Lucias and soldiers, and just a few, like a 1 or 2 tanks. But now it's just like all Reapers, Winstons, and Lucias. What do you think of the just generally of the new game type, Shade?
I think I like it. It's super fun. It feels pretty fast paced. But I think one of the core issues with it right now is the fact that once you just capture it, you could just leave right afterwards. And I find most of my games just end up being spawn camps at that point. You basically stand on the point, capture it with your team, and then you just go and you stand in front of whatever enemy spawn you can find and just kill them over and over again until you hit 100%. So I think there's probably some things to be changed about that. And I'm not sure if Blizzard will do that or if this is how it was intended from their point of view, is just kind of turned into who can spawn camp the fastest. But I kind of hope to see that change soon.
Seagull, thoughts?
I would say currently I actually love the new maps and the game mode I like a lot, but I'm a little bit worried about the mass amount of like death pits to just have all over the maps. Like I swear, man, like you just walk anywhere on
that's
that
my
map.
favorite part.
Like, I know, like a Lucio just runs up and just like
Just
half your
knocks
team's
you
dead.
off.
It's like, oh, okay. I mean, otherwise, I mean, I actually like the maps a lot, even with those. And I think it's kind of interesting. Sometimes they have like weird little mechanics like that. Like we have seen that map has a lot of pits of death, right? We have Volskaya has the moving platforms. I like that they're getting a little creative. As for the game mode itself, I do understand where you guys come from, like the Winston Reaper type of thing, because currently I think that's so popular is because you capture the point and then you go, and what Shayed was talking about, you kind of go forward and you spawn camp or do a forward hold where basically you hold off of the point, and then that way they have to run a little bit to the point, and that gives you more time to respawn and retake. But the issue is, from my experience, that if you have the point and then you swap to a lot of tanks or just anything, it can actually become really obnoxious to try and retake the point, because it's sort of like the diva problem where, from last beta phase, we had one diva run in 1 by 1 and like stall the payload at the very end of a tournament game. This is almost the same thing, but really kind of on a low level where tanks can basically delay it a little bit over the course of the game and therefore get a 20 or 30% advantage. That's something I noticed a lot when we were looking at the map last night in scrims and stuff, because we're looking at like, why don't we just run double Winston, double Reaper, double Lucian? It's like, yeah, sure. We just stomped with some random team just for like the entire map. Like, wow, this is really good, guys. But still, I mean, the fundamental issue I have with it is, tanks are very tanky in this game, but the timer still goes down if you're fighting. So if you run a tank heavy comp when you hold the point and you take a really long time to die, you gain a huge percentage. And that's where I think a lot of these 99% versus 99% team games come from, because that's the only time where, you actually have to full cap that. You actually have to wipe the enemy team out. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's, where those like mass amounts of overtime are coming from in this game are due to like tanks living for a long time and forcing it to overtime essentially.
Yeah. What do you guys think would be a good tweak to it? I mean, it's so great at casual levels right now, like you guys were saying, but it does sound like it needs to be maybe something little. Any ideas?
I mean, I'd like to see them get to the point where you have to have like at least one person still standing on the point. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like just thinking about King of the Hill, it's like you control the point, so you should be like at least near it or like on it or something. It just kind of was really shocking to me when I got into the map for the first time, and I was like, oh, we actually don't have to stand here? Like, what is going on?
How was it in TF2? Seagull.
TF2 works exactly the same way, except we don't have tanks in Team Fortress. So basically, it came down to pure just whoever. Also, spawns were also significantly longer in Team Fortress. Mm-hmm. And we had longer cap points in general. So basically, it would take longer to capture the point, because right now it caps in about, pretty quick. I think that's partially why, Shayed was talking about they probably want one person on point type of tweak. I think they actually made the cap point capture so quickly in reaction to that. They're like, okay, we want people to defend it. But then I don't think they realize, in organized play, people are so good at covering all the exits out of a spawn or everything else that people will never reach the point unless like a tracer. And so right now it's basically the TF2 game mode, except with tanks and faster respawn. So I think that's why, see a lot of 99% games right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It would be interesting to see if they, like, how many more maps. Do you guys anticipate them making more game modes or just more maps for each of these game modes moving towards the release?
I sure hope so. I mean, we are still beta. You have to remember that. The game feels more polished than most games that have been out for years.
Especially now.
You can't forget that it's still a beta. So I think absolutely we'll see more game modes over the years. Definitely more maps.
Oh, the years.
I can't wait.
But I mean, leading to the release.
Before launch?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I kind of hope they don't, to be honest. I think that now what we have is really good. Already. Yeah, there's like 10, 12 maps, I think. How many maps is there?
9?
10? I don't know. Anyways, that's plenty though. Like, I don't even know if I see all of them in the run of a day of playing now. So I kind of hope that if they do want to add more, that they wait until after launch.
Is there enough variety now for competitive events, Seagull?
Enough for what?
For just competitive events, just interesting competitive, or making competitive events interesting from the standpoint of like map bans and things like that.
One thing I'm a little worried about right now is the fact that so many of the current map pool are just basic capture point maps, and those aren't really viable for competitive play. I mean, they do work. It's just players don't like to play them because commonly what ends up happening is essentially, so these maps are very small. They're usually only 2 capture points. They're not like 3 or 4 or anything like that. So if you wipe them on the first point, you have an ultimate advantage for the second one. There are many, many times in pub play, as well as in tournaments and competitively, just in general, where you win the first point, cool, you win it, go to the second point, use 3 ultimates, automatically win the game in less than 50 seconds. And it's just like, wow. When you have such a variety in timers from, this game could either be, just think about it from a tournament scheduling perspective, like, oh, this map could either take less than 50 seconds on this half, or it could take literally 10 minutes. It's like a huge disparity. And so that's why a lot of teams are, I think, enjoying the new, I think what they call it, control game mode. They enjoy payload, and that's because the game, artificially extends out the game duration by saying, okay, push the payload to the end, set, wear this timer down, and therefore teams have a lot more chances to show off their skill because there's a lot more fights and team fights going on, and that way there's less randomness involved, and players feel in general more comfortable with that type of gameplay.
I will say we did see an awesome match on Hanamura between Eccentric and Melty. That is where they pulled out the Bastion strat. It was decided at I think it was 12 seconds difference between the two teams. And yeah, I mean, it does feel a little bit more random. If you get caught off guard and you get wiped once on one of the control point maps, it can basically be over. But I don't think that counts out the maps entirely. Like I'm glad we still have the option to play them. Because yeah, we had a lot of fun on Hanamura yesterday.
Yeah, it's a good change of pace at least, right? Instead of seeing just the same types of games over and over again, just some crazy short game. It can be super short at times. Okay,
I will never complain about seeing the same map over and over again after the stress test weekend.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh gosh, oh man, yeah. All right, loot boxes. Let's talk about just this new addition that they made in terms of skins. Just lots of that added element a lot of people were asking about, right? So they introduced skins, voice bundles, emotes, sprays, and intros, right? I think those were the 5 things. And they're doing it in the form of a loot box, which is pretty similar to CSGO. It's kind of like the CSGO Hearthstone thing mixed together in terms of like legendary, epic, rares, and things like that. What do you guys think about this whole thing and just how they've executed it? Fishstix.
Well, if alts building too quick was the number one thing the competitive community talked about, I would say a progression system is probably the number one thing that the casual community was talking about, other than please give me beta, please give me beta.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've never cared all that much about progression systems myself, but I will say the skins and the sprays and the voices, and they're just very high quality. I mean, Blizzard's just done a great job with their art assets and the audio assets and all that stuff. So, props to Blizzard. They made a progression system. It's ridiculous. We got friends like Ask Joshy, who's been playing 12 hours a day. And he still has so long to go to get everything. So I think that they definitely made a system that is going to keep people playing for a very long time, and as long as the casual scene is happy, I'm happy. That's pretty much all I think about it.
Dude, Joshy got Valkyrie. She got Valkyrie Mercy out of a loot box the other day. I've still yet to get a legendary. So
Wait, me?
No, Joshy did. Joshy got a Valkyrie one, I think, out of a loot box the other day. So I was like, oh, Shade's probably like super jealous of that.
Salty.
Yeah, I've yet to get how many legendaries do you guys have? I know I'm like level 25 right now, but I'm sure you guys are in the 40s or something.
I think I have 3 right now, maybe 4.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't play anything other than Mercy. I don't look at other skins.
You don't look at other skins. Wow. Okay.
I have like 2 other ones, I think, but one of them I got myself. So.
How many legendaries do you have, Fishstix?
I actually don't exactly know which is a legendary and which is not, but I have that sick Reinhardt skin where he's like the old guy, and then
Isn't he always an old guy?
Yeah, but you can
not
like
under the
see his
mask,
old face. And then I have one more. I forget what it is right now.
Oh man, you guys are.
Yeah, that's how much I care about progression. Sorry.
Oh man, no, I think the skins are awesome. Like I was looking through it with my son, and we're just like, oohing and awing like at all of them. So, given how crappy my luck is, I'm just kind of like waiting for the shop to open. Actually,
I don't think they're gonna let you buy individual skins.
That's what sucks, man. It's like
you can buy like 100 loot boxes and hope to God that you get something good.
That's what I mean. It's like that CS:GO Hearthstone kind of style, but. I actually like it. I think they did a really good job. I think, like Fishstix was saying, the artists, I think they've done an amazing job in terms of that. And haven't played too much with the sprays yet. I think there are like way too many sprays. I feel like some loot boxes are all sprays for me, which is like, shit, that's like such a bummer.
The only skin I don't actually like is the pink Tracer one, where she's got like the shaved head on the side. I think it looks terrible.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The one thing that seeing loot boxes gets me excited about is the potential to have esports cases like they do in CSGO and stuff like that. If people could spend $5 to buy a case and some of that money goes into a prize pool for something like that would be my dream for this game. So
Or even
hopefully
just
we're
like
going in that direction.
team-based skins would be cool too. Like I know in
Yeah.
Heroes of the Storm they have the C9 mount from, was it Worlds last year or
Mhm,
BlizzCon? So that will be interesting to see if there ends up being like team-based skins for heroes and stuff.
That would be sick.
Yeah, I think that would be all those things. I think are actually somewhat. I mean, they're very important. So you're actually growing the competitive like esports scene too.
Incredibly,
Yeah,
incredibly.
it's like one of the things
And
holding up the
actually,
CS:GO scene.
yeah, I mean, it's not something we've seen Blizzard do before. I mean, you can't do that in StarCraft or
Hmm.
Hearthstone or any of these games. So hopefully they dip their toes. I mean, it's basically printing money for Valve right now, Dota 2
Yeah.
and CSGO. It's worked for games like Smite. It's worked for games like Killer Instinct, the fighting game for Xbox One. Like they raised $100,000 with a skin in like a weekend or something. So it's worked entirely every time anyone's ever tried this concept. I just hope Blizzard does it too.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they don't.
I think it's a little bit of a different concept with CS:GO because I think a lot of that comes also from being able to trade and sell and everything like that too. So I don't necessarily see Blizzard doing that with their cosmetics.
No,
Maybe
please, no,
maybe not
please
the
not
trade.
that.
But
Maybe not. Maybe not that aspect of it, but the crowdfunding prizes I think is still very possible. It doesn't require any additional new platform or anything, right? I mean, they could just do it on their end, just showing, just taking a percentage out of whatever purchase there are, and then just showing a price pool being built, right? So it's really up to
well,
them.
speaking to what Fishstix was saying about like even the esports side of it, it would be really cool if, whatever like heroes were played the most at BlizzCon or something, or like to get special skins based off of whatever team played them. I guess the most would be really cool.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Riot way, where the winning team at Worlds gets their like characters that they played have the same skins.
Yeah.
Or team skins. That'd be really cool.
Okay, new UI changes. What do you guys think about, I guess, just the ending new UI with more stats, the different cards now? You like these changes? Shade?
Um,
I know
no.
I know you have some issue, at least with Mercy.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically anything that I have a complaint about that is kind of related to that is to do with Mercy because she's what I see the most. And what ends up happening is, like I can have an incredible game, like 10k plus
Yeah,
healing and
let me
like
show this.
50 revives, but it's not going to change anything because at the end of the game, my screen ends up just looking like all zeros. And
Yeah,
it's
I'm showing one of your screens right now.
Okay,
This is what Shade's screen looks like almost every game.
every single game that ends up being what my screen looks like, and it's actually like depressing and makes you not want to play support. And that's never actually happened to me before. I really enjoy the support role, and it's just like it's miserable to look at that all the time. It's not
Yeah,
fun.
that's pretty sad.
Well, even beyond that, Shade, weren't you also telling me that due to the current in-game progression system, each time you level and you get a gold medal, just if you get a gold medal, you get plus 150 XP.
Right.
Yeah.
So add that up times, the 100 a game or 100 games or so you've played, and you're down like a couple levels already, stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's a huge part of it too. Is I'm actually really surprised that I've been able to like outlevel Seagull to be honest, because he gets basically like 3 gold medals a game, and that's 150 XP bonus for every single game. And you don't get any as support, at least for Mercy. It's possible to get it as Zenyatta and Lucio, just because they're still, have the ability to deal damage for the most part. But it's not very often that I'm just like whipping out my Mercy pistol every game and going on like a 15 kill streak or something. And now that eliminations don't count as assists anymore, it's a huge problem.
I wonder why
I'm
they
getting like
decided
200
to
to 300 XP less than my teammates every game.
Yeah, I wonder why they decided to remove assists. Any reasoning you guys can think of for them doing that? I mean, were the supports getting too much credit for assists?
But I mean, it didn't even matter at that point because the progression system wasn't in existence, I guess. So like giving supports credit for eliminations at that point didn't really matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter, but they could have at least, they could see the roadmap, at least what they were doing for progression. Maybe they saw it as an issue, like if, I don't know, Mercy's winning eliminations over an AD or just a deep character. Is that an You guys see that as an issue in terms of I guess perception? Fishstix?
I mean, absolutely. Have you played a public game in this game? How often do you get two supports on a single team in a
Yeah.
pub?
Yeah.
It just barely happens. It almost never happens. Almost every pub you play, you get one tank, one support. That is it, and that's awful. I hate that. It's so bad.
It's usually the last two
almost
things chosen too.
yeah, almost every composition should have two support. I mean, Brandon Seagull, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it's probably the case right now. So yeah, we definitely need more incentives to encourage people to play support, learn support, and embrace the support.
And some tanks are even having the same problem too. Like,
Mhm.
aside from, I guess, like Zarya and maybe Diva, with Reinhardt, you're kind of just fire striking when it's off cooldown and holding up your shield for the most part. So if you're getting the most eliminations or final blows on your team as Reinhardt, then you probably should requeue in a different team.
Right. Seagull, what are your thoughts?
I think overall, one thing that this is just something simple that might help is probably, I mean, there do need to come up with better incentives for support. And I think the easiest way for me personally that I could think of to do that is, I was actually just running through the in-game tutorial, like literally right before I came on the podcast. And I was wondering, like, they never show how well ults synchronize. I mean, you just play like a boring 76 in the game, never show how fun supports are or anything like that.
Yeah.
If they did something simple like, hey, save your team from this black hole by popping your Zenyatta ultimate. Something cool like that. And the basic tutorial, like the first thing a new player gets into the game, like trying to encourage support, encourage tanks in every way possible by showing all three roles in the basic tutorial is probably one of the easier ways I can think of to increase the support and tank population in the game.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that. Influencing people right from the get-go, right? Just with the tutorial. It's the easiest thing for them to understand, but that doesn't help, I guess, engage them with the rest of the new concepts in the game. Okay, spectator mode. So this is one thing. I think a lot of people in the competitive space, mostly organizers and things, people that work in that realm of things from the standpoint of competitive Overwatch, were looking for a better spectator mode, just because the previous one they had bugs in it, but also it wasn't very conducive for just from the standpoint of viewing, just with all the icons at the bottom, and there were just various complaints, right, about it. Spectator mode looks almost exactly the same to me. I mean, Fishstix, you could probably speak a little bit more since you were driving your event there, but is that true?
There's been very little changed. I think Blizzard has said this publicly, so it's okay to say that they're definitely going to revamp spectator mode entirely at some point. They just haven't really had the time or resources to devote to it yet. So there have been a few very minor tweaks. They did fix the spectator hijacking bug, which if you watched tournaments in the previous phase of the beta, you'd see that our point of view kept getting hijacked and it would just be clicking around a bunch, which was very annoying. So I'm super glad to see that fixed. They also bumped it up from 4 spectator slots to 6, which might not sound like a big deal, but it actually, I'm so glad they did that. It allows for more producers, more people capturing footage. So very small tweaks in the grand scheme of things, but I'm glad to see them making at least some progress in this phase. And I know, and they've said publicly, Jeff Kaplan has said that they are going to be addressing spectator mode much more seriously in the soon, hopefully before the game comes out, I hope. But if not, I got to be honest, our current spectator mode is serviceable. I think we're going to talk a little bit more later about what we'd like to see, or maybe we should just transition to that, or
yeah, we can go. Yeah, what would you like to see? I mean, we can just go straight.
I mean, the main thing that we need is pretty obvious. I mean, right now you see who's alive and who's dead with the character portraits at the bottom of the screen. Not only is the UI for that kind of messed up, it like covers the health bar and things like that, which is silly. But you don't see things like people's health and their ultimate status at a glance. which is just super, super important for spectating. You can see if they have their full ultimate, which is good, but if I honestly like, they don't need to innovate here. Just copy
Yeah.
MOBAs.
Yeah.
Pull the portraits to the sides, the left and right hand sides of the screen. Give little tiny health bars and little tiny ultimate charge bars. That's all we really need. Beyond that, they just need to fix a couple of bugs. The kill feed, it isn't showing up properly right now when you're spectating in third person. There's some issues with control point, but a few bug fixes and pulling the portraits to the side, giving a little bit more information. I honestly think that's all they need to add to make it serviceable. There's a lot of nice to haves that we could have, like maybe they have automated camera angles for each objective. As the payload moves around a new bend, you can hit a hotkey to snap to a new camera angle. But beyond that, it's not terrible. It's actually fine, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely that's good. Definitely good to hear. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of just not having enough information and having so much of the screen being taken up by those icons at the bottom, where they could be adding a ton of things for us to be able to keep track of the overall game. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Seagull? What do you think of the whole just spectator mode? I know you're playing in the games most of the time, so you don't get a chance to watch, what we're seeing at home. But any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think there's only really two big improvements I can make right now with spectator mode off the top of my head. And the first one is, I think that right now it's hard to tell the health of the player who's getting shot from a first-person perspective. And I know in-game as a player, the health of the person I'm shooting will pop up above their head, but in spectator mode, that isn't currently implemented. I think, if you can correct me here, Ben, but I don't watch that many. I watch a lot of VODs, but they're usually from first-person perspectives, not necessarily from a spectator standpoint. So that's probably the first improvement I would give. So that way people can more easily determine, like, wow, that guy did a lot of damage to that such and such, like the Reinhardt just got one shot. And that's easier to show if you see the health bar, it's like go 100 to 0. Mm-hmm. The second one would be, oftentimes, for me at least, I find it tough to see which team people are on. And just in terms of, probably the bottom of the screen, it will say like one person's red, one person's blue, but sometimes doesn't match like overlays or whatever else. I find that to be actually somewhat difficult to keep track of mid-game, even though from a player perspective, it's actually, I instantly know it's like this person's on the other team, this person's on the other team. But sometimes I do, like if I start watching a stream midway through and say a team fight's going on, I find it very, very hard to figure out who's on which team at a moment's glance.
Oh, okay, I see. So just having more of a indicator, that just maybe an aura or something around them, or just different colors. Maybe I think red and blue is always used, right, in the game.
Well, right now, control point is the worst, because when you start spectating from one person's perspective, it switches the team colors as if you were playing as that player. We don't. The same issue isn't in the payload map, so I'm assuming it's just a bug that will be squashed.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, definitely looking forward to that. They still have some time to change that. That's a nice thing about spectator mode, is that in the next few months, it's definitely more acceptable, I think, from the community too. Just since the competitive side of things is, again, just like a small percentage of folks that are having to deal with it. Okay, let's see. I think from the standpoint of changes, we can move on to like what we'd like to see. Maybe just a couple things. What would you like to see in the next few